We're going to learn a lot about elder law as well as our rights for seniors.
A certified elder law attorney is an attorney who has earned an advanced certification from the National Elder Law Foundation. There's actually only 10 SELAs in Illinois right now. If they wait till a medical crisis arises to do planning such as powers of attorney, often they've waited too long and the person is no longer able cognitively to understand the documents and execute them. We end up in guardianship court. That's really costly. It's public. It can be very upsetting for family dynamics. If you can set up your own wishes beforehand, it is far better.
How does a formal legal plan act as a shield against family feuds? And we just talked about this resigning and then disagreements between siblings during high stress health transitions.
Yes. So a comprehensive legal plan really helps prevent disputes because you're establishing clear authority. For instance, in the powers of attorney, you're saying, if I can't make these decisions, here's who I'm trusting and I want to make these decisions. So it is a great show of here's what mom or dad's wishes are, here's what the individual would like. So that should always carry the day generally. You can create then your healthcare directives that document the wishes. Like, I don't want an autopsy, I don't want organ donation. So if family members are fighting over that, we have a clear path of this is what mom or dad wanted, right? So while it can always prevent disputes from happening, the goal is you certainly are more likely to have one if you don't have a comprehensive legal plan in place,
Yes.
but we can include kind of provisions within the documents that can try to prevent it as best as possible.
Yeah. No, and that is whoo, you don't know the things that we've seen
I'm
in
sure,
in
I'm
home
sure.
care. It gets crazy sometimes because someone may feel like they were slighted because they weren't named power of attorney and they have the better decision making skills and that sort of thing. But clearly, you mentioned, a lot of what I say when we're talking, you're giving talks to families about having their affairs in order. So thank you for that.
And I always say, like if someone comes in after the fact with concerns about what's going on and I'm looking at the estate plan documents, like, well, this is what mom and dad did when they were competent and this was their clear wishes, right? And so that's what we would want to follow because that's their guides for everybody else if they became incapacitated.
Mhm.
So even if somebody's disappointed on, oh, I wasn't named agent or I not getting the crystal dishes or whatever it might be, it is what mom and dad or the individual wanted. So
Yeah.
that should trump.
Yeah. So if a family is already in a health crisis and hasn't planned ahead, what crisis planning options are still available to protect their assets?
So I'm guessing this is from a Medicaid or government benefit standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So I have a lot of people coming to me at the worst possible time when there's some sort of crisis. And there are still things we can do. They might be a little bit more limited, but at least we do have options. If they have powers of attorney, the powers of attorney can have additional planning provisions and long-term care planning provisions built in with asset protection. So another reason to plan early. But if we have more limited options, there are still some Medicaid spend down strategies that we can include. So sometimes maybe the person's over resourced for qualifying for Medicaid care in a nursing home.
Hmm.
Maybe they owe money on their mortgage. We could pay down a mortgage that their spouse is still living in the house for. So kind of converting countable assets to non-countable assets is one strategy. Uh, spending funds down either for care at home first or to get them into a facility that they really, really like or want to be in. We do a lot of crisis Medicaid applications.
Mm.
Are some exempt transfers under the law for if you have a disabled child, you can transfer funds to them without penalty. You could transfer the house to a caregiver child under certain circumstances. There's a lot of spousal protections built in as well. So I try to maximize that in a crisis plan if we have a spouse at home. There is also something called a half-a-loaf strategy where we can look at either setting aside funds in a gift to family members or into a special needs trust for the elder going in on Medicaid, and then use another chunk of funds to cover the penalty that will result from that gift or transfer into a pooled trust. It can get a little complicated,
I see.
um, but there are strategies. There's also some Medicaid compliant annuities that can be purchased that can help. So there's different things. And the key is it's so fact specific. So a lot of times people will come in and say, my neighbor told me I should do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, oh no, that's not what we want. There's a variety of other options that might work in the circumstances that they're in. Because what might have worked for the neighbor
Yeah, it
might
might
not
work
work
for you.
for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense because even with Medicaid and the spend down, I think that's a whole nother topic. I'm gonna have to bring you back on because a lot of folks don't understand how to qualify for Medicaid or even if they can qualify for Medicaid and the spend down process and how it all works. So we get a lot of questions about that. So I'd love to bring you back on to talk specifically about that.
That I would love to because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yes.
Sometimes the facilities also don't give straight information. Either the workers don't know
Hmm.
for whatever reason. I did have a client who came to me where it was a married couple and he had spent down all his funds because the facility told him he had to, and all we had left was the house and $10,000. I could get back some, but I couldn't get it all back, and he was entitled to have about 120,000 at that time. So
Okay.
really devastating.
That is certainly interesting. I bet he felt terrible. A lot of times people like to give information and misinformation at the same time because they think they have it all. I'm the first person to say, look, I'm no attorney, I'm no doctor. Please follow up with your attorney or your physician because my knowledge is limited on that. Home care, we can talk about that all day, every day, every day. But those other things that is not my specialty, I don't pretend to know. So how does the law protect seniors' rights to stay in their own home? And what can an attorney do if that right is being challenged?
So the law generally supports aging in place, so staying at home, and there are some protections. So there's some fair housing laws that prohibit age discrimination in housing. So that's one protection. There are Medicaid home and community-based services
Mhm.
that can provide alternatives to being in a facility or institutionalization. I will say there's not as many home and community-based programs as I would love. I'd love to be able to keep people at home with care at home as much as possible, but sometimes the care needs are more
Beyond.
so to get them
Yeah.
in a more specialized facility. But the goal is aging in place, aging in your home is ideal. And from a financial standpoint, we've got real estate tax exemptions. So you've got your homestead, the senior exemption, and a senior freeze if they qualify, which helps make real estate tax more affordable here. And in the Chicago metro area, we have some pretty high real estate taxes. So that helps seniors be able to afford staying at home. And there was a very important Supreme Court Supreme Court decision called it's referred to as the Olmstead Decision, and it really is setting up the right for individuals with disabilities to receive state funds in the most appropriate setting for their needs and promote community living as opposed to institutionalization. So when there's challenges to that, attorneys can advocate for their client. If the client's got capacity, if they have powers of attorney, we can represent the agent in fighting for the individual to be able to stay home. The goal is always what's the safest place for the individual
Yes.
and where can their care needs be met.
Yeah. That's a good point because someone may want to stay at home. However, it may not be safe for them to stay at home.
Exactly. And that's so tough.
Yeah. It is, especially if someone has been in their home for 40 and 50 years, that's all they know, but it might not be the safest place for them, especially if 24-hour care is needed and that individual is not able to afford the care that is needed.
Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. If you need a higher level of care that you can't provide at home because of, for whatever reason,
Hmm.
the needs or the financials, that's really when it's a tough decision to talk about and
Yeah.
make that just make.
Yeah. So we touched on guardianship a bit earlier. What would you like, under what circumstance would a, I should say, circumstances would an individual find themselves in guardianship court?
There's a lot of ways one might end up in guardianship court, but I would say the most
It's me
common,
three.
okay, so the most common is someone lost capacity and they didn't have powers of attorney in place.
Mm-hmm.
So someone needs to be able to make medical and financial decisions for them. So that's when we probably the main reason we go into guardianship court. The second reason I would go into guardianship court is if we have an exploitation situation, if someone who doesn't have capacity, maybe they have powers of attorney,
Mm-hmm.
their agents not acting for their benefit and maybe exploiting them or allowing them to be exploited, we can go into court, guardianship court, and petition to set aside or suspend those powers of attorney and get people investigating what's going on and is this person really acting for the benefit of their elder or their principal.
Yeah.
So that's another common one. Sometimes I will go into guardianship court for long-term care planning provisions.
Mm.
So a lot of people have the very standard statutory power of attorney for property. It's provided for in the statute. There's a section for additional powers, but a lot of times people don't add those in. So we would often go into court and for a limited purpose to have the ability to gift the house to the community spouse from a Medicaid standpoint. If they don't have gifting powers in their power of attorney, we can't do it. So we have to go through the court. And the court's not a fan of gifting funds unless it's, of course, appropriate in the situation. And under Medicaid rules, transferring the house or gifting the house to the community spouse or to a caregiver child is appropriate. So that's another time we often use it.
Okay. I want to touch on this topic briefly because I've seen this a couple of times in the years we've been in home care. Conservatorship. Under what condition would someone seek conservatorship? And then you can explain to our audience what that means.
Sure. Well, what I'll say is Illinois doesn't really have conservatorship. So we have our process is guardianship. So we have
Okay.
the guardian of the estate, guardian of the person. Other states have different rules, and a lot of times the conservatorship is the guardian, the equivalent of the guardian of the estate in Illinois.
Okay.
It's kind of a terminology issue. And in Illinois, though, we just don't, it's referred to as guardian of the estate.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for clearing that up. If today's conversation is making you realize that you need more support at home, the Right Choice Home Care is here to help. While an attorney like Heather protects your legal rights, we protect your daily quality of life. Our caregivers are trained to follow the plan your medical and legal team have put in place, ensuring safety and medication consistency. Let us handle the daily routine so you can have a peace of mind. Visit us at rightchoicehomecare.com to learn how we can support your family's journey. Now back to our interview. So what are the most common mistakes you see families make during hospital discharge process from a legal and financial standpoint?
That's also a great question. It comes up so frequently too, and it's at a really difficult time, very vulnerable time for families, right? There's been some sort of medical crisis. They've been scrambling with their loved one in the hospital, and now it's time for discharge. What do? They're getting thrown a bunch of information.
Yeah.
So it can be very scary. A lot of times the discharge is to a nursing home for rehab, right?
Yes.
And In those circumstances, I would always ask first, was there an ability to have a home care assessment? Can the person be discharged home first? Would that be safe where they could get services at home? So if that hasn't been done, that's a mistake I've seen a few times because I feel like a lot of times it's just pushed right into a skilled nursing facility for rehab when some people might do better at home.
Yes. And I think that boils down to the patient not knowing their rights,
Yes.
in you not understanding that you do have the option to rehabilitate at home. Because if the physician can prescribe you home health services with
Mhm.
physical therapy and occupational therapy or whatever the need is, and they can recoup at home. I just bring it down to patients not knowing their rights.
It's true, and the hospital staff's in a hurry. So it might not come across, or it might just get glossed over a little bit, or just mentioned very briefly.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. If they are discharged into a nursing facility, that's usually faced with a whole nother circumstance of trying to find a place. You don't have to take the first one that the hospital recommends for
Mhm.
discharge. I like to tell my clients to go check out the facilities, see what you think, because what I might be okay with might be very different than what they would be okay with. And this is your loved one, so you need to make the decision on what's best for them. The other piece to that is those nursing home contracts can be pretty rough, for lack of a better word, right now. Sometimes a child might be signing language that makes them financially responsible for the cost. There could be arbitration provisions. There's a lot of things in that document that can be problematic. And usually you're just wanting to make sure your loved one's taken in and cared for. So people are just signing
Signing
that.
away. Yeah.
So that's a really scary thing. And I think, more people should be aware that you have the ability to say, like, this is contrary to the law. Sometimes there's provisions that are contrary to the law. But if you sign it, I'm going to have a hard time fighting and challenging that.
Yes. Yes.
So those are big things. Also, failing to invoke a Medicare appeal if the discharge is too premature.
Yes.
A lot of people just follow what maybe the hospital's saying or the nursing home saying, and perhaps it's premature. And we've had a lot of clients be successful on fighting that and challenging it and get more coverage. So
Yes. I'm glad that you brought that up because in one of my podcasts, I talked about the whole nursing home thing and just really going to check it out and just do an unannounced visit and just ask them to show you around. And you'll be surprised to see that you really don't want your loved one there, you know. And then the whole patient's rights, I did a piece about patient's rights, and I'm glad that you're touching on that because we don't know our rights as patients. And it's like you said, we just want to get the sign in of the documentation over with because we want them to go to the next step, not thinking there may be an in between process. They may not necessarily need to go to a rehab in that facility, or, nursing home may not be the best place for them. However, if you don't know your rights, then you're going to be signing anything because you feel this is the correct next steps for you. So I'm glad that you mentioned that and reiterated what I was talking about on one of my previous podcasts.
no, I'm so glad you do talk about that because it is a real issue. And also kind of tied to that with the nursing home piece is there's a lot of assumptions by people that Medicare will cover the nursing
Oh
home
my gosh, yes.
long term, and really trying to stress to people that no, you get up to 100 days
Yes.
and you're not guaranteed the full 100, depending on lots of things, including how you're rehabbing, things like that.
Mhm.
But a lot of clients just presume that, oh, well, I have Medicare, it'll cover my stay in a nursing home. And that's not the case. And the nursing homes are very expensive.
Yes, can be very, very costly. In fact, once you pass that 100 days and your loved one still needs to be in that nursing home, you can pay well up to $800 a day, depending on what nursing home you're at.
Yep.
A lot of folks don't really think about those things until they're in that moment, in that crisis moment, where now the nursing home is saying, yeah, well, Medicare is not paying for any more days. and then now they're not even prepared for the discharge, and then now they have to go home, so they call a home care company in crisis mode and just go with any home care because they don't want to pay $600 a day or $800 a day what that nursing home is requiring them to pay to have their loved one continue to be in the rehab, and then not even considering calling Medicare to find out or even challenge the discharge. So again, it boils down to individuals not understanding or knowing their rights, or even the adult child, right? Because they just want to get this process over with, but it can put you in deeper issues than not understanding your rights. So thank you for talking about that. A lot of good information. I think a lot of information that people may not know about their rights that you touched on, and explaining what power of attorney is and how to go about getting that and those different things in between, like guardianship and that. So I'm going to ask you to tell the audience how they can get a hold of you, how they can contact you.
Sure. I have my law firm is Voorn, Jaworski in Preston. We have offices in New Lenox and Chicago Loop. You can reach me at 708-675-7156. You can also email me at HV like in Victor, OORN at V as in Victor, J as in John, P as in Paul, lawyers.com.
Thank you for that, Heather. And then one last question. How do you give a care?
That's a fantastic question. So, as we've kind of talked about all along here, education is really a big piece of this puzzle for people navigating elder law and their rights. So, I'm a big fan of educating, and with all the misinformation out there, I like to kind of give back. I speak pretty regularly at senior centers, libraries, community organizations, just so I can tell people here's what you need to know about Medicaid. Here's what you can do for long term care planning. Here's what guardianship looks like and what an estate plan should provide and why to do one. So I like to get that information out there. They don't necessarily have to come to me, but I want them to go somewhere so that they can get their affairs in order. So that's a big piece. And from a professional standpoint, I also do a lot of speaking and writing for continuing legal education. So I speak to other attorneys about how to do some of these things because there's a lot more seniors and elders out there, and we need a lot more people to help them as the boomers get into that age. So I do a lot of speaking from a continuing legal education standpoint too, because I think that helps all of us help that population.
Yes.
And then from a client standpoint, we are dealing with clients going through a very vulnerable situation. It's very difficult and stressful. So my team and I are very good about returning calls promptly, explaining the complexities and outlining kind of a roadmap of here's the options and letting them decide what's best for their family or themselves, but really giving them the patience needed to make some of these decisions that are tough. Really, elder law isn't transactional. It's really about preserving someone's dignity, independence, honoring their lifetime work, and ensuring their values and wishes are complied with when they're not able to do it themselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And, I do have one last question.
Sure.
How often should someone visit their power of attorney documents?
I think so. I tell people that really every 5 years or so, review that. But I have a caveat, and I kind of refer to it as the 5 Ds. If there's a change in your life circumstances, so a disability occurs, that's a good time to look at it, or you get some sort of diagnosis. It's a good time to look at it and make sure this is still what you want, and these are the people you want in place for you.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a death in the family, another good time to look at it. Any new dependents, new kids, family members that you want to provide for and include. I also use domicile. Did they move? Did someone move? Because if you moved out of state, the documents are valid if you did them in Illinois, but every state, as I said, is different. And so you want to talk to an attorney in the new state or wherever you've moved to so that you can make sure they're still valid. But there's a lot of different reasons. Any life-changing circumstance is a good time to just take a quick peek and make sure it still supports what you want.
Yeah, thank you for that. And attorney Heather and I have a seminar coming up April 21st, and she's going to talk a lot about your rights as an individual and deep dive into powers of attorney. So stay tuned for that. We will be sending out information about that soon here in the Illinois area. So thank you, Heather, for your time today. I really appreciate all of the insight that you've given to us and the audience. Once again, thank you for your time this evening for giving us some great education.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad we could get this information out there.
Yes, thank you. As attorney Heather explained, a strong legal foundation is just as important as the physical care provided at home. When your legal protection and daily support work together, you create the best possible environment for your loved one. Here's your next step. Check your records today to ensure you have an active power of attorney. If you have legal gaps, contact an expert like attorney Heather Voorn. For help managing the daily care routine and keeping your loved ones safe at home, visit us at rightchoicehomecare.com.